necessary, and they will see afterwards that if the questions are not coming, we will move to the next paper presenter. And I expect and I request all the listeners to drop down their questions in the chat box. It would be very easy for us to communicate to the speaker. Okay, I'll start with Chandrasekhar Yadav. Before starting the presentation, please, Chandrasekhar, give a brief introduction about yourself, and then we can proceed to your paper. Over to you, Chandrasekhar.
Thank you, Manvi. Okay, I hope I am audible and visible.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Chandrasekhar Yadav, and I'm an MPhil scholar from the Department of MIL&LS. I'm pursuing my MPhil under the supervision of Dr. P.C. Patnaik. And I'm going to present a paper titled Keeping the Narrative Alive, a study of Vimayana at the crossroads of globalization. Okay, and I might need to share the screen in a few minutes. So please allow me to do that.
I think you can directly share screen, or do you want to be a co-host for that?
I think you have made me the co-host, I think.
Okay, then you can do that, please.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, a very good morning to the esteemed faculty members and the fellow participants. Now I'll begin with my paper presentation. My paper is titled Keeping the Narrative Alive, a study of Vimayana at the crossroads of globalization. I'll begin with a quote and I'll come back to it later on. And it is a very simple quote. It sort of defines what is a medium. And I quote, "A medium is a channel for communicating and includes familiar favorites such as radio, television, or the printed page." Okay, now I'll begin with my paper, and excuse me for some theatrical language that I may have used. I'll begin my presentation. In the moments of difficulties, art has time and again been the resort for populations across the world. When the world entered its latest ongoing pandemic in 2020, the story was not any different. Albeit, we were long past the inception of a digital world with our lives already being captured on social media platforms. Humanity was staring at its own reflections, gradually fading into an outpouring of excessive information on the internet. We were confined to physical boundaries, yet connected to our kin via internet. Communication, the thread which knits the fabric of society, found different media to sustain global communities. People found a myriad of ways to keep themselves entertained in the time of a global crisis. Virtually everything moved to a digital ecosystem in a fast fashion. At this critical juncture, scores of people are rediscovering art as a medium of representation of their collective and personal experiences. The credit shall find its rightful attribution in the phenomenon of globalization. The corollary being, to a certain degree, the wide-scale pandemic found its way into today's world owing to globalization itself. The above two statements require a separate space for discussion. However, they serve a single purpose here, to situate the tone of the argument being presented via this paper. The double-edged sword that defines the dynamics of the modern day world, that is globalization. At one end, globalization acts as an enabling agent for providing multiple avenues not limited only to big corporations, but at the other end pushes marginalized communities further away from the mainstream. The understanding of a phenomenon like globalization shall rightly be always situated in a state of flux. Though globalization posits itself as the harbinger of bringing distinct communities closer in some sense, owing to the technological advances, elsewhere it reveals itself to be another form of Western imperialism which has gradually eroded indigenous cultures. In a recent report, which is titled Evaluation Study of Tribal or Folk Arts and Culture in West Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Bihar, conducted by the Grameen Vikas Seva Sanstha, West Bengal, which was submitted to the Planning Commission of India, Niti Aayog, the study group remarks that, and I quote, critical analysis of the primary data collected from the respondents by our field investigators, as well as the information obtained from credible, authentic secondary reports, have led us to infer that globalization has triggered the emergence of a synthetic macroculture. This synthetic macroculture is gaining popularity day by day and silently engineering the gradual attrition of tribal or folk art and culture. Globalization has exerted adverse influence in the social, economic, and cultural arenas. Especially our indigenous cultural exclusivity is getting decimated. Our traditional culture is being replaced by a homogenized and westernized culture, which is fomented and fostered by rampant consumerism. This has a negative impact on the third world countries. Its vitiating influence is destroying cultural identity. Unquote. This emergence of synthetic macroculture, which thrives on the back of late capitalism, has impelled indigenous folk and tribal artists to look for alternative occupations. In the wake of a homogeneous culture, a unified economy, and a singular identity propagated by the percolation of globalization into the deepest, innermost recesses of regional communities, the indigenous identities are facing the danger of a seemingly complete erasure from the socio-demographics. A synthesis of popular artistic forms and unique indigenous art forms might provide a possible measure for the resolution of the complex issue at hand, the preservation of indigenous cultural expressions. This measure surely invites a detailed scrutiny at the micro level, the site of interaction of dominant and endangered cultural forms. A need for careful intervention arises when a powerful force like globalization dictates the terms of this supposed synthesis. An ecosystem is required to negotiate a cautious preservation of the cultural identities, the plurality of social structure, which finds its explication in the hybridity of globalization at large. The above deliberation provides the foreground for the central discussion that lays ahead in the course of this paper. Within this context, Bhimayana, published in 2011, a much celebrated and a seminal graphic novel on the life story of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, presented through a pictorial narrative created using the Pardhan Gond art by the artists Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, extends an invitation for reinterpretation. This reinterpretation holds a significant relevance in the contemporary times. It is an effort to initiate a conversation on the importance of medium of expression, which mediates the structural or characteristic differences between different art forms. How an amalgamation of the popular, and by popular, I mean a medium that is dictated by the presence of a global economy. How an amalgamation of the popular and the local creates a hybrid space for the coexistence and survival of both. In the critical scholarship, pictorial storytelling, under the umbrella term of comics, has long been subjected to a continuous contestation for attaining a legitimate space within the arena of literary genres. The evolution of its form from being merely a sequential juxtaposition of images or drawings along with the simple text to a more mature and complex form of a graphic novel has posited it as a highly potent medium of artistic expression. This relatively new form began taking shape with Harvey Kurtzman's Jungle Book, published in 1959, and affirmed its legitimacy as a literary genre with Will Eisner's A Contract with God, published in 1978, which attracted a wide attention. Soon after, Art Spiegelman's Mouse proved to be the most influential work as it brought him the accolade of a special Pulitzer Prize for Literature in 1982. This groundbreaking recognition for the art form placed graphic novel amongst the serious genres of literature. Thus, mid-1980s onwards, graphic novels multimodality has stimulated various artists to express or retell complex socio-political narratives with a refreshed perspective. It has allowed for a greater degree of creative freedom as the medium provided a dynamic platform which offered a lot of possibilities to be explored within the spatial confines of a blank sheet. Bhimayana, as a work of art, stands at the crossroads of globalization and offers a fresh outlook at the pre-existing narrative which has majorly remained at the periphery of the socio-cultural discourse. The pandemic laid bare the ever-widening gap between different social entities and how there is still a glaring disparity of availability of basic resources or amenities for a large section of the population. At this juncture, a reinterpretation of Bhimayana seems befitting to situate and evince the sidelined story of the marginalized people. In a brief summary, now I'll present. Okay. Just a minute. Actually, I'm unable to share my screen.
Are you doing it from share screen option?
Yeah, I'm trying from the share screen option. I'll get back to it later. I'll complete it.
Yeah, carry on.
In a brief summary, Bhimayana, Experiences of Untouchability, is a retelling of the journey of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar in 4 sections aptly titled Water, Shelter, Travel, and the Art of Bhimayana. Each of these sections represent the quintessential aspects of human life. The life story of Ambedkar becomes the vessel for the artists to tell the story of the ever-present caste discrimination and the inhumane treatment subjected to Dalits. The incidents in each of the books sections, ranging from Ambedkar's childhood up to his conversion to Buddhism, are represented with an intricate visual narrative. A contemporary relevance of the narrative of oppression is maintained throughout the novel with the help of images of news articles about caste-based atrocities from the recent times, indicating that not much has changed. The unfortunate social reality of caste discrimination still persists. For the illustrators of the book, the Gond artists Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, the form of the graphic novel provides a new avenue which is full of possibilities. This is the medium which allows them to go beyond the traditional mode of sequential pictorial storytelling. The blank space encourages them to exercise the khulla expression with which they want to tell a rather fluid narrative. Upon being approached by Sri Vidya Natarajan for being the illustrators of the graphic novel, they proclaim, and I quote, "We would like to state one thing very clearly at the outset. We shall not force our characters into boxes. It stifles them. We prefer to mount our work in open spaces. Our art is khulla, open, where there is space for all to breathe." The use of Pradhan Gond art, the Digna patterns, embodies the spirit of nature. The ecology of Gond art derives its symbolism from its proximity to the natural world order, where one sees free-moving animals and a boundless presence of flora. The word Gond comes from the Dravidian expression Kond, which means green mountain. The usage of animal imagery is rightly attributed to the nature of the incident taking place. Each animal symbolizes its corresponding characteristic traits. For example, a fierce animal like lion represents an intimidating personality. A peacock represents the moments of happiness. A bird generally refers to a soft spoken person. The objects as well metamorphose into living beings. The train becomes a snake. Elsewhere, a park is represented by Ambedkar's face. Fish images represent the incidents associated with water, etc. This ecosystem of symbolic representation provides both the tribal artists an artistic tool to explore and probably go beyond the domain of graphic novel. This choice of expression is reminiscent of the photo magic realism. Much of the artwork appears like a dreamscape. In its essence, the Khulla expression subverts the traditional boxed or paneled format of a graphic novel and creates a unique space for itself. In doing so, this at large seemingly redefines the structural construction of the graphic novel. The Western tradition of pictorial storytelling has mainly followed the Aristotelian narrative structure, which has a sequential beginning, a middle, and the end. Durgabai Byam, Subhash Byam, and Srividya Natarajan take some notable creative liberties in devising a complex non-linear narrative with jumping timelines between the present day and the different incidents from Ambedkar's life. The reader is equally enticed by the visual intricacy as they are intrigued by the complexity of the narrative. The simultaneous use of colors and the gray scale provide a stark contrast and negotiation between the positive and negative moments in the narrative. The art of Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam in the novel demands a cultivated visual literacy in order to understand the layered symbolism. Much of the scholarship on Bhimayana has already focused on the aesthetic aspect of its tribal art. Mostly critics have given favorable reviews and heaped praises on the achievement of the tribal artists and story writer, whereas some have reduced it merely to a decorative and artistic work as it loses its narrative traction due to the illustrations being deeply imbued with visual metaphors and allegories. Both sides of criticisms make fairly valid arguments in their own right, but Bhimayana has come to be known as one of the most celebrated graphic novels across the world. It has featured in many reputable lists of recommended graphic novels across the world and has popularized an indigenous art form at a global level. The conjunction of these two art forms creates a space which ensures the survival of the narrative of oppression by bringing it to the mainstream mass communication, as well as it serves as the revival of a rather gradually eroding tribal art form. This brings us back to the discussion that how does one navigate the impacts of globalization on indigenous cultural identities? Bhimayana here serves as the prototype of the kind of amalgamation of multimodality that is represented by the medium of popular art form, graphic novel, and the peripheral art form, tribal art. Seemingly, this amalgamation negotiates and respects the characteristic differences of these art forms for the survival of each. It is interesting to notice how two different art forms having their respective impediments in their path to attain legitimacy under the mainstream join together and create a platform for mutual transformation. In concluding remarks, it can be added that within the context of becoming one of the most popular graphic novels, Bhimayana explicates the complex reality of the global market economy, and its success as a graphic novel points out the malleability of different media. If perused with diligence and put to proper utilization, a medium can yield favorable results. It can provide a designated space for the coexistence of differences, survival of sideline narratives in a plural society, which at one hand is characterized by multiplicity, but also connects to a sense of global community, albeit not a homogeneous one.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chandrasekhar, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you for abiding by the time limit also. The floor is open for the discussion. I request you to please drop your questions in the chat box.
And I'll try to share what I wanted to share.
Yes, please, if possible, please do that. Well, I don't think so. Anyone has any questions related to your presentation, because it was a good presentation and everything was covered. And even Gaurema appreciated that. It's a great presentation. Chandrasekhar, he has written in the chat box. I think you can see that easily. Is it possible for you to share the video? I mean, it is working.
I had a few slides to share, but I'll have to exit. Then rejoin.
That will create a problem, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. We'll move to the next paper presenter, which is myself only, but the point is I will be presenting at the last. I want to see the rest of the paper presenter and see that if time is there, then I will be presenting that thing. Moving on to the next paper presenter, Mr. Veen.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. And okay, a brief intro about me.
Sorry, just wait a second. I think Dr. Pankaj Sharma has just dropped a question. Let me just take that question and then we can move to your presentation. Yeah, so Chandrasekhar, Dr. Pankaj Sharma is asking, sir, do you think through the graphic literature, tribal culture can get a great boost and presence? Chandrasekhar, you are muted.
I mean, I think so. Thank you for the question. I think so that it is possible for the graphic literature to give a platform for tribal culture, okay, at a global level, so that it survives the test of time. Okay, and I mean, it is a very complex situation because globalization itself is sidelining these tribal cultures, but you have to find a way to coexist in a such a complex reality, because you cannot do away with globalization at once. Okay, so you have to find alternative methods to survive. So I think graphic novel or graphic literature provides that space for tribal culture.
Yes, that's so true, that you need alternative representations to make it more viable for the public, also for journal, academic people also. Yeah, moving on to the next paper presenter, Kaveen, over to you, and you can just start introducing yourself and then move to the presentation.
Thank you for the time. So my name is Pavini, and I am presently pursuing PhD from IGNU. And I'm also teaching as an assistant professor in Kalindi College. So that's that about me. I would like to share my PPT if that's possible. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, MIL department, for organizing such an interesting and fascinating, such a program where we can, such a webinar where we can share our work. I mean, basically. Yeah. So I have titled my talk as my paper as reading Naga tribal literature through folklore. It's before I go on into the presentation, I would have to give a certain disclaimer, in terms of how it is a very broad topic. And when I say Naga, it entails a large corpus of tribals within it. So in that sense, yeah, that's a disclaimer. Also at the same time, because I wanted to look at the certain thematic unity and structure within the origin account of the Nagas. So I've kept it as tribal Naga identity. So there are certain disclaimers, as in one is that I could not consider all the Naga tribes. The other thing is that I have relied on the print publications available and accessible to me. So those are some of the limitations as I go into the paper. Yeah, I would like to know. Right. So the term Naga, just to give a brief context to the tribal identity that I'm looking at in the paper. So the term Naga is used to identify a large number of tribal communities residing in Nagaland, Manipur, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and even Myanmar. So there has been assertions and contestation on the validity of recognizing the Nagas as an autochthonous group. And the paper is an attempt to delineate and understand the tribal lives and identity of the Nagas through the lens of folklore narratives, to briefly trace intersections and divergence that emerges within inter-tribal narratives of, again, the Nagas. Yeah, so there are slight variations, again, with regards to the numbering of how many Naga tribes are there in India or overall, including the bordering states, Myanmar. So some would, categorize it as saying that there are 66 to, so the number varies from 66 to even about 87 at times. Yeah, and however, the major tribes, that the census of India has listed, we have, for instance, 1991 would list 35 Naga groups as scheduled tribes, which are 17 in Nagaland and 15 in Manipur and 3 in Arunachal Pradesh. And likewise, 2001 census would list 16 tribes. In Nagaland with 17 and 18. So there are 18 numbers, but 17 and 18 is again classified as Naga. 17 is just kept as Naga, and 18 would be classified as, again, unclassified Naga in Nagaland. And with the slight change in Manipur 2011 census would be that, again, Pomai is added to Pomai Naga identity is tribal identity is added within the recognition of the list under the census. So the number varies depending on how one has count the tribes and the sub-tribes, also on the period of again the research conducted. So if it was done way earlier, then the number would of course be lesser, but in contemporary times the number would definitely increase, no doubt. And that happens because smaller tribes are clubbed together under certain categorization, whereas in some cases the sub-tribes becomes again recognized as separate entity ultimately. So for instance, one or two examples that I have over here would be that under the Pomai Naga tribe, for instance, would be recognized prior to its recognition in as under Mau Naga tribe or Shifomai tribe, which was recognized in way back in the 1940s, 48 if I am not mistaken. Yeah. Similarly, Ziangmai, Liangmai, Rongmai, etc. would be clubbed under Zelengrong before, in some cases. So that's the explanation for the variation. Now the term Naga itself is again contested, and so many people believe that it is, most researchers believe that it's perhaps a term that is attributed by non-natives, through the interaction with the people themselves. And so the translation varies with regards to the idea of what Naga meant, from young warriors to new body to nakedness. And for instance, warrior, also hillmen, in the sense that again most Nagas are Naga tribes are sort of concluded as having this fascination and love for the hill, for the hilly regions, and perhaps that is one of the reasons. And then we also have Burmese terms where again the earring, where Naka is literally translated as earring to recognize or identify people who wear earrings in the earlobe. So basically that's one of them. And so there's another one again where the word is translated or seems to represent the idea that to refer to people who do rituals with their victims' head. So basically the idea of, again, the head hunting tradition within the Nagas, and that's where the term seems to have been read into. So the etymological meaning of the word Naga, however, remains vague, till today. And it is as probably as Shimray concludes, where, it is difficult to say as to when the term Naga came into existence. There are various theories as to the origin of the name Naga. It is surprising that the Nagas, again, who are so conscious of the meaning and connotations of the personal names, do not have any meaning for the word Naga. So in the Naga languages, so the tribal languages, we do not have an exact parallel language term for Naga. So it is therefore probably that, again, the establishment of the fact that it's probably a name given by the outsider. Right. However, so with regards to, because again, there is also this political movement with the freedom movement that also goes along with the Naga identity and the talks. So there has been, contestation and debate with regards to the validation of the recognizing the Nagas as exclusive, unique tribals or group. So I won't go so much into it because, again, my intention is not to establish a political identity or the uniformity of the people or the shared rootedness of its people. But slightly, of course, I would be getting into it as well. So the collective consciousness of the concept "we are Nagas" identity came only about as late as the first half of the 19th century. According to certain scholars. And in the absence of antique written document and evidence on the ethnic tribal group known today as the Nagas, one comes across contrast and sometimes extreme views on the discourse regarding Nagas. And I have one or two examples over here. One is the background of Naga society. So basically, I'm approaching the paper through an insider's perspective. I myself being a Naga for one, and also the writings that I am consulting, most of them are, of course, by the insiders, though, of course, I am also looking at some of the colonial writers, like, for instance, Hutton and Hemmendorf, etc. So these two instances, for instance, Backdrop of Naga Society is a publication by Nagaland Andhra Pradesh Congress, basically. And so it rejects, basically blatantly rejects the existence of collective consciousness in the past amongst the Nagas as a cohesive ethnic group. And so according to the mentioned publication, the Nagas were merely a group of heterogeneous, primitive, and diverse tribes that had nothing to do with one another or have a little or none or negligible contact with each other. So on the other extreme, we also have views that are not very well articulated and defended, but again, the claim that the Nagas are a single that they share shared ancestry, and that again they are single entities since time immemorial. So the former. Okay, so I have issue with both of the views, the extreme views that is shared in certain narratives. So, for instance, the first view, which blatantly reject the commonality of the Nagas, it is based on the writer's observation that, again, the observation of the lack of dominant normative system and practices that constitute and governs national identity among the Nagas in the past. And so he would even go on to call them, he himself being a Naga, like the publication itself is a Naga publication, would call the Nagas as uncivilized and unlettered, and accounting the fact that they were never independent nation in the past as directly proportional to the lack of cohesiveness and shared rootedness of the Naga tribes. So for me, that would be fallacious. So unlettered, of course, does not necessarily mean civilized, as one could gather and argue from the post-colonialist framework as well. And similarly, again, the absence of modern or developed societies characteristics, and governance systems isn't a justifiable rationale for concluding the tribes as sharing no racial affinity. So in that sense, every society does begin in a certain pre-model state and move on towards civilization and modernity and proper systematic organization, and therefore I find the argument weak. So likewise, again, there are ample loopholes in considering the Nagas as exclusive and unique racial unit, as Hewasa and Denny would have pointed out in their essay. Both the views are untenable with their eccentricities. So as far as anthropological historical argument inquiry goes, most writers opine that, again, the Nagas belong to the Mongoloid race, and they must have migrated from different places of Southeast Asian countries and islands around it. So in that sense, B.B. Ghosh, for instance, would write about the Nagas as belonging to the Mongoloid stock of human race, and that, again, that there was this migration of different groups in the past, and one group went southeast and they became Chinese, another group southwest and Tibetans, and third groups probably went southwards, south, and later on they were divided into different tribes of China. One of the last group is probably the Karens, who are now living in Parent, and that even the Nagas probably belong to this third group of migration. Okay, so the research, the paper or the focus of the current paper is not to establish the political identity of the Nagas or inquire into the validity of its political movement and rationale, where the narrative often tend to polarize the Nagas identity vis-a-vis the other Indians' identity. So for me, of course, it's approaching the subject through the cultural, social, and the folklore aspect of the life of the tribals, the Naga tribals. So the intention is to approach the Naga tribals' conception of life, origin through folklore, the cultural and social identity, and the implication embedded within the folk narrative. So folklore studies have, as we know, folklore studies have proved indispensable for cultural and ethnographic research. In Naga's case, again, investigating the folk narrative is all the more apt, for the oral tradition is still the predominant tradition of its people, or rather, as the Nagas are still in the transitory period from oral to written culture, even today, and therefore it becomes apt to approach the community, the subject, through folklore. I have specifically focused on these myths that I came across with regards to the Nagas and their identity. So particularly, so I'll be briefly focusing on this one, heavily. So one is, so the myth is the myth of Zali Musaro. So that's in Pola's, Pomai's language. However, again, Mao, Pomai, they share this similar, myth, and the plot line itself, the structure itself is similar throughout. So there are fascinating tales and myths around the origin of the Nagas. One of the predominant amongst them is, again, that of the tale of Zali Musaro. So this is the eponymous character, the name itself is, the title of the myth is the name of the character. So she is considered as the first woman on earth through whom human generations populated ultimately. And she is also given that semi-divine ancestral figure. Of course, she's not worshipped in that sense, so she's fascinatingly linked with the concept of pristine water. So in fact, the people would translate the meaning of the name as pure water, or the one associated with pure water. So in that sense, again, one could also see the to a certain extent the parallel with the flood narrative that is predominant in different cultures. Right. So according to oral source, the story goes, the myth goes, a mysterious cloth impregnated her while she was sleeping under a banyan tree. So the banyan tree itself has, several significance in different culture. So the resulting in the birth of three sons. So the God or spirit, sometimes it is used as God, sometimes spirit, sometimes even some version would call it Satan, though I prefer the spirit or the small letter G, God, tiger and men. So they were believed to be brothers in that sense. Well, with time, again, the mother grew old and sickly. So again, she is humanized after a point of time. And on the fateful day, as the mother lay on her deathbed, the tiger was sent away. So basically, as she lay sick on her deathbed, the sons were to take care of her one after the other. And the story goes that when the mother is taken care by the spirit, she would get fever. So in Pomai's language, in Pola, Ra is basically Rachi. We call fever as Rachi. So Ra is basically God, God or the spirit. So interestingly, that's how there seems to have connection between fever and God. And so the mother would get high fever whenever the spirit or God is looking after her. And then we have the tiger, whenever he watches over her, she would be extremely exhausted and tired by the end of the day, because the tiger would be cajoling and playing with her. And of course, in that sense, the tiger has this cannibalistic nature, and his intention is again wild and always exhausting for the mother as well, as she lays sick on her sick bed. And then we have the men who ultimately would nurture her to back to health, and by providing the necessary nutrients and food and the care that she needed as a sick person. So ultimately, the story goes, and that when on the fateful day that the mother died, the time before she passed away, the God, so God, it should be kept small letter God. So God and men, sent tiger away, like of course in collusion with the mother, because the mother did not want her body to be consumed by the tiger. So apparently, the tiger was sent away, and then they dig a grave for her, and she was buried under the fire heart. So that is another interesting narrative. So the brothers erected fair. Okay, okay, that's about that. I'm gonna briefly come back in the analysis part. When I looked into the interpretation part of the myth and how it reflects certain worldviews of the Nagas. So the brothers erected farewell monolith. After her death, they continued to live for a while, but ultimately they separated. Where just before their separation, they erected these monolith stones. So monoliths are another another common practices amongst the Nagas, and it is very much pervasive in the Nagas, social life. So right, tiger stone god stone, and men stone. So the monolith are named after, are credited after them. And so to basically, it was to commemorate and perpetuate their memory and the brotherhood, symbolizing their brotherhood. And the belief goes that if any of the monolith falls, it also symbolize, or that it heralds the decline of the particular species. So and then the narrative is alive even today, that the monolith stone of the tiger has fallen, and it's signifying the fact that tiger's era in the current modern world is over. In a sense, tiger's reign is no longer the dominant reign in the present time. So the myth of Zalim Musa, what we find is in different Naga tribes, for instance, amongst the Sumis, and this is from Hewasa and Venusa's article, where they have reproduced the myth of Ifrini and sons, where the plot is similar. We have similar plot structure with Zali Musoro, except for negligible variation. I'm saying negligible variation because more or less the story goes similarly, except for the fact that Satan, for instance, is used with synonymously with spirit in general. Though of course there's this disclaimer that it does not have biblical connotation within the narrative, and the order is slightly changed in the sense that in the myth of Zali Musoro, we have the spirit as the eldest, the man as the youngest in the Sumis version. So the it is the other way.
Praveen, I'm sorry to interrupt, Praveen, but please proceed towards the conclusion of your paper.
Yeah, okay, it's almost done. Thank you for reminding.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So right, so we have similar stories, myth, where we have the tiger spirit man in among the Rengmas, and then we have similar three brothers account, which in the account by Joseph S. Tong, where it is basically on the headhunter culture, so the Nagas in general. And then we also have it in J.H. Houghton's account, where the Nagas and the plainsmen and tigers. So these are two tales, but it's basically mixture combination of this one tale, the myth of Zali Musoro. So and then we have other oral narratives of origin. So which I'm going to summarize it up. So we have, for instance, that the group came out of a cave with the help of monkeys, and then the story goes. And then we have among the Changs, which also similarly talks about a cave. And the Angamis have also other versions, and similarly the Tangkuns. So now most of the Naga tribes have more or less the same story, that they came from a pole. The Nagas in remote right. So I'm going to skip this part. Thus varied and exciting as these narratives goes, one may still conclude, of course, that legend of their origin or stories about their origin that describe them as autochthonous is not sufficiently authenticated. Now, just brief analysis of what the main research argument that I have over here is about the concept of, again, the nature versus culture. So in anthropology, as we know, the concept of the raw versus the cook has long been associated with dichotomization and polarization between nature and culture. So in the wide-ranging study of the Bororos might, Lévi-Strauss would have highlighted the existence of the structural and thematic link between the opposition of the raw and cooked in mythological thoughts and man's effort to establish, a balanced relationship. So in the myth of Zali Musoro, we find a rich binary order where one can also find, the dialectical opposition that Strauss would argue. So for instance, the plot confront readers at multiple levels. First, in the impregnation and conception to the cloud, one can argue that the opposition between the autochthonous versus evolutionist or even creationist origin conflict is sort of partially reconciled. And so in that sense, as Durkheim explained and articulated the difficulty of the function of studying totemic myths, saying that, it no doubt explain nothing and merely shift the difficulty elsewhere, but at least in doing so, it appeared to attenuate its crying illogicality. So similarly, in the myth of Zali Musoro, we could argue that the myth has attenuated certain oppositional forces at play. The myth is fascinating despite its apparent contradiction with reason and rational conclusion. So it denies, the other thing is that it denies heterosexual union for procreation, thereby resonating with also the virgin birth of Mary in the Judeo-Christian world. And also, so the concept of three in one God, or the mystery of the Trinity, also gets replicated in the story of the tiger as brothers. And so on the one level, there is democratization of the spirit, animal, and human world. And therefore, the myth can also be read as taking issue with the hierarchical setting of the three kingdoms. However, again, at the crucial moment of burial, which is essentially also an act of human culture, the animal is sent away, while the two brothers, conclude the last rite of the mortal. So in this, one sees a clear shift or dichotomization of the natural, animal and natural, and human or cultural world, where burial is both at the literal and metaphorical level. yeah, again, level in that nature is buried as indicated by the absence of the tiger in the right. And also again, yeah, where the tiger has ultimately no access to because he couldn't find the burial spot. So the fact of the burial place is fire heart, which is another important connection. For instance, in Greek mythology of the Prometheus one, find how again the first gift or one of the favors that the god first give to mankind is the gift of fire, right? So in that sense, again, it becomes another primordial symbol of human civilization. So to conclude, in that sense, so again, coming back to Levi-Strauss' examination of human consciousness in The Savage Mind, for instance, where he argued that all humans are capable of same mental process. He instigates the various ways in which people organize concepts such as myth to make order to make sense of the natural world. So the origination myth of the Nagas discussed here does reiterate that human man has intelligent structure, irrespective of its stage or phase of development. The tribal world, particularly the Nagas, likewise displayed creative output of the people. No doubt it is difficult to arbitrarily make sense of what appear to be nonsense, especially about material situated in distant past, but one is still swayed to think along with Dante, who tersely puts it that whatever is contained in a folklorist text is meaningful, even if we do not always have full insight into that meaning. So with that, I mean, the research is still to be further taken forward, and but ultimately that's a brief inquiry into the origination account of the Nagas. And with that, I think I'll conclude as with time is also running out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kareen. I'm sorry to interrupt you in between while you were presenting, but we have to somehow abide by the time. But it was a really nice ethnographic research paper. I really liked it, and I would personally love to have a great interaction with you because I'm so inclined towards cultural meaning and mythological folk tales that are there in the Naga tribe. But somehow we have to abide by the time also. But you have a question from Dr. Pankaj Sharma in the chat box. So I'll read out the question for you. Are there folk or oral narratives that have the history and culture represented for thousands of years? If yes, what are the main motives in those narratives?
Okay, so I would have to say that I have not done extensive research as of now, but the little inquiry that I have made, so one is this myth of origin, and there are other stories that, but I don't find a lot of account besides this one with regard to the origination account, or I can't even say that, one, it's difficult to establish how long the folklore or stories have existed, because ultimately it's the oral society that we're studying, and particularly with the Nagas again, except in the 19th century where the colonialist writers have started sort of documenting certain stuff. Before that, there's no documentation, so it's difficult to sort of timeline the stories as such. So I guess that would be my brief answer to the question.
All right. If there's another question for her, please drop that in the chat box. We'll wait for another 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll move to the next paper presenter.
Can I also say one small thing, like with regards to the second question? What are the main? I think it should be main motives, right? So main motives in the sense there are a varied amount of stories within the Nagas. Like, so we have, in fact, very much parallel stories of the Greek and the Roman world, the metamorphosis and transformation stories, animal fables, orphan stories, a lot of that. So the structure would be the orphan would turns out to be the wise person, and the rich or the witch would often be depicted as the mean and the evil woman, and stepmothers again predominant. So I think a lot of it coincides with the larger folk narratives as well, besides beyond, I mean, the border and across the world. So that perhaps is the brief.
Yeah, and he also says that maybe it comes out of our geological historical research. Yes, and I suppose your research is more inclined towards anthropological and ethnographic details of Naga tribes rather than on literature. And I suppose that this is your PhD research also, and I suppose that because you are so much involved in this. So a detailed version would be in your PhD. I mean, that someone can look up for that. Yes, I will just.
Yeah, please do. And
Yeah, he
thank
has
you.
one more comment. Okay, thank you so much. We'll move to the next paper presenter, Esther. Esther, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, hi. Good
Hi,
morning,
hi,
everyone. Yeah,
Esther, you can proceed by introducing yourself and
yeah,
then
sure.
to the paper.
Let me try sharing my PPT.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, is it visible to all?
Yes, it is visible now.
All right. Yeah, so my name is D. Esther, and I'm a PhD research fellow at the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi, working under the supervision of Professor P.C. Patnaik. And I also teach at Kalindi College. Yeah, so the title of my presentation is Khelo Lesha Haso in the Pomai Naga traditional life. So let me just begin by explaining the theme of the paper. Right. Yeah, so the Pomai Naga community is a subgroup of the Nagas in Manipur, as you have already seen in the previous presentation. So I belong to Pomai community, and yeah, so I'm an insider myself. So the language of communication among the community is called Pola. So the information that I have gathered for my presentation, for my research work, is communicated to me through Pola, and I have transcribed and translated them in English. Right, so a little clarification, a little explanation on the local term that is being used here. So Khelo. So K refers to bachelorhood. So this is a masculine noun, and lo refers to maidenhood. It's a feminine noun, and Khelo means the state of being unmarried. And Lesha, it means love. So love as noun. And hasso means the way how a thing is done. So in a very loose understanding, very literal translation, the title of my paper is the romantic love of the youth in the traditional setting of Pomai Naga society. Right. So the idea of romantic love is fundamental. It is a universal thing. But the notion of normative love, how one should love and how one should express it, how one should pursue it. So all these normative varies across space and time. So deeply entrenched in the social and cultural milieu, the long-lasting and timeless tradition of Pomai love songs and love tales replete with the theme of desire, with the theme of valorizing love, idealizing feelings and endearing relationship and so on. So what I'm going to do in this paper is to take some select traditional practices specific to the community and present how explore the intricacies of romance, of courtship and love within the community, a traditional setup. Yeah, so a Pomai Naga world is a very hetero social world where men and women interact and socialize with each other. So there are certain conventionalized practice that facilitate active interaction and socialization of young boys and girls. So it is these institutionalized custom and practices that enable, that foster individuals' choice of who to fall in love with. R.R. Shemri, he commented on the Nagas, and I quote, Naga individual knows no other life except that of the community life. They work in group, eat in group, and sleep in group. So this also holds true for the Pomai Naga society to a large extent. So togetherness and cohesiveness is the essence of Pomai Naga communal life. So eating and feasting together, engaging in work together, sleeping together. So all these make Pomai Naga society a very cohesive society. So so what I'm going to do in this paper is not to deliberate on the theme of romantic love per se, but to present how to present how this aspect of life is regulated and projected within these community practices. So the first practice that I want to look at is the practice of the custom of Pawe Taju on Chitene. So Chitene is a community ceremonial event of transplanting seedlings, rice seedlings, for the first time of the year. So this is like a special, grand event. So on this particular day, parents and women folk, they would be walking in the field, in the paddy field, transplanting rice seedling. And boys, the village youth, exclusively the boys, they would navigate the entire village fields. They would go around everywhere in every field and help everyone in transplanting work. So this circumnavigation is called Pawe Taju. So the activity of the activity of Pawe Taju has a deep, romantic implication. So what happened is when the boys take a stopover at the ladies' field, the ladies, they would so that they would hand over a bunch of seedling to the boys. So they would engage in romantic flirtatious chit chat as they work. So there are many love songs, Puma love songs, that describe about how the village youth, the boys and girls, they are happily wooing and courting each other in the field. They're stepping each other's toes beneath the mud and imploring the parents, the elderly, not to judge, not to reprimand the fun of the youth on this particular day. So Shitane is an occasion that is most fondly celebrated by the youth, that allows maximum socialization of the young people. Yeah, so the next practice that I would like to look at is Kelochizofe. So Kelochizofe, it basically means the dormitory system. So Kelochizofe is the generic term for the place where young men and young women sleep. So the term literally means sleeping place for the unmarried youth. So I'm using unmarried youth because the word youth can be very relative. So here I'm particularly talking about young people who are not married. So the place where young men sleep is called Kechizafe, and the place where the unmarried women, the young girls, sleep is called Lochizafe. So like many other tribal groups in the country, the Puma had this dormitory system where young people of both gender, of their own age group, they would sleep together, and the traditional dormitory system was equated to the institution of learning and teaching. The dormitory was seen as a place that shaped, to Kodwe Puna, the life of young people socially, politically, morally, religiously, and educationally. And it is also seen as the seat of the Naga culture, as quoted by Taka Temjan. So I have observed that entering into this institution, entering into Kelochizafe, was an informal rite of initiation for the young people, because you enter into this institution, you go to Kelochizafe when you reach a certain age. So right, so the dormitory, the Chizofe, was mostly provided by a family who had spacious space. Basically, wealthy people who had bigger house, who had bigger space. And in an interview, an informant maintained that getting a space as a bedroom depends on the favor and the goodwill of the family. And this is how she recalls her experience at Lochizafe as a young girl. I quote, "Now everyone is confined in one's own bedroom at their respective homes. Back then, we used to sleep in groups and at Kelochizafe with our own friends. There were 12 of us in our zafe. So every year fall, all the 12 of us as a group would go door to door imploring them, please favor us and permit us to sleep in your house this year. And whoever agreed, we slept in his house throughout the year. So once in a year, all the members help the family or the warden to carry and transfer his firewood home manually from the jungle. So going to dormitory, going to Luchizofe, this was their everyday routine. So when evening sets in after dinner, everyone moved to their own dormitory and they would come back home in the morning. So I observed that particularly with girls' dormitory, Luchizofe girls' dormitory functions as both as a private space as well as a social space. So private space because at one level, this is like any regular bedroom where one rests and sleep, where friends share their inmost feelings with each other, the inmost, secret affairs with each other. And at the same time, the same space becomes the space where socialization of young boys and girls happen. So boys from Kechizofe, boys from their own dormitory group, they would pay a visit at Luchizofe in the evening, mostly in the evening after dinner. So this conventionalized nightly visitation of young boys at girls' residence or girls' dormitory is called Lochi Liju. So this visitation could be done as a group thing or as an individual thing. So, but in recent times, since we don't sleep together as group anymore, single visitation, individual visitation, and it has become a norm. An informant, this is how an informant described about the nightly activities that happen at their dormitory. She says, when the boys visit us, there were evenings when we would spin yarn, and the boys would help us leisurely with spinning yarn. So sometimes they would bring varieties of jungle fruits, and we would bring dry maize, jade beans, soya beans, pumpkin seeds, etc., to eat and while away the night, flirting and chatting. At times, they wouldn't bother to budge, and we would have to tell them, boys, we are tired today and we are sleepy. We did rigorous work in the fields. Only then they would leave. So sometimes we would spend the evening courting and wooing each other, serenading in song. When Launo season approached, the whole group used to visit elderly folk to learn folk songs for Laudoju event. So another romantic spree that happened at dormitory at Lochizofe is Laudoju. Laudoju literally means choosing the songs. So it is a kind of recreational love song competition between boys and girls sung in antiphonal manner. So particularly during the night of Launa. So Launa is a festival, is a post-transplantation festival that would last for about 2 weeks. So in this occasion, this practice of singing song to each other, it becomes very prominent. So songs becomes the language through which they express the feelings and interest for each other. And the theme, the motive of the song revolves mostly on praising each other, flirting with each other, or sometimes insulting or patronizing each other. But these are all part of romantic courtship. So I think that is specific to the youth. So this is a gist of what happens at Lochizofe at women's dormitory. So observing women's dormitory as a space conducive for developing romantic relationship, this is what R.R. Shemri has to say, and I quote, "It was here in this school," means a dormitory, "that the seed of love germinated and the soil of future family were prepared." Now I want to look at this practice, Lochi Liju, as a conventionalized practice, a custom that helps in developing love and romantic relationship between boys and girls, and how it has changed over time. So yeah, so this is basically, as I've said, this is a form of gentleman visitation at young women's place. It could be her residence, or it could be in her dormitory. So I think I couldn't find an English equivalent for this. There's this word gentleman caller that I've come across, but that is not quite the concept. Whereas Lochi Liju, this is culturally specific, and yeah, so it is conventionalized, and visitation has many purposes apart from a romantic pursuit. So yeah, but as far as the romance is concerned, this is like a traditional way of going out on a date. So if two people are dating, then it is sure that the guy would often frequent to her place. So traditionally, it is the gentleman who visits the girls and not the other way around. So there is this colloquial idiom that would say, so loosely it is translated, because of visiting Poni's place too much, the backside of your long pant is getting, it's tearing. So that's an euphemism to say that the guy has been frequenting the house of his love interest so much so that the lower part of his so the bottom part of his long pant is getting torn because of excessive sitting. So so in typical cases, the boy would also carry a guitar to sing song for the ladies. So again, guitar is an important prop in the romantic discourse of Pomai. In an interview, an informant summarizes his experience of courtship in the following way, and I quote, "I personally feel that love was more overtly expressed during our time. So if we did not meet our lady even for a day, they would sulk and cry and run. Back then, life was such that everybody stayed in the village and one got to see each other every day. So not seeing each other for a day was unbearable. So at Luchi's affair, girls would even bring the best chicken part and slide it in the palm of the lovers when nobody was watching. So when they had a plan of lovers meeting, faking sickness to stay at home was common so that she doesn't have to go to field and meet her lover. So in such meetings, the lady would express her love by giving him fresh eggs picked straight from the chicken coop and feeding him with chicken." Yeah, so there's this song that beautifully recaptures the intricacies of love and romance and courtship in the context of Pomai traditional indigenous life. There is always, it's titled "Oh My Beloved." "There is always heavy rain during the season of paddy transplantation. Shall we romance during such rainy season, or during the fine weather of autumn season? We won't be able to romance during the paddy transplantation season. As we go to the paddy field early in the morning and return late when it is totally dark. So we don't have the chance to meet. But during autumn, when the paddy plants are flowering under such fine weather, everything around looks beautiful and exciting. It is the most suitable season for courting and for selecting suitable partners. When a suitable partner is found, 2 twigs of low are plucked and kept under the pillow to observe omens through dreams. If omen is good, the partner is selected, otherwise rejected. If the omen is positive, by next year we will be joined together to cultivate a paddy field with a loud shout, yell, and yodel." So this is taken from a book written by Haba. Right. So this particular song typically situates romance and courtship within the context of Pomai indigenous, Pomai agrarian milieu. So Pomai folk life centers around agricultural activities. So the rainy season, which falls between May to July, this is considered the busiest, the most tiring season, because rigorous work is done. This is the season when the entire village has to do paddy transplantation. And there is no time for them to stay at home and relax, because transplantation work has to be done within the monsoon, so that the delay of it will result in no yield or very inadequate harvest. So village folk would go to the field early in the morning and come back home at dusk. So, and after dinner, they would just sink into a deep slumber after, so this is also the time when the boys, they have to halt, they have to stop their customary visitation at girls' place, Lochili. So certainly you don't get to see your lover like every day in this season. Yeah, so also the autumn season after the completion of transplantation. So this is a time when, again, love booms. So when agriculture activities are at ease and with the serenity of green fields around, this is the season for lovers. So in this season, young girls would mostly stay at home and they engage themselves in handloom weaving. And this is time when lovers can, spend maximum quality time together. And yeah, that's so.
Esther, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but please move towards the conclusion.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So also the engagement, the couple engagement is done by consulting dreams. So dreams, again, consulting dreams is paramount in the belief system of the Pomai. So by customary norms, betrothal and marriages happen mostly in winter. So so here is the picture that I'm showing, an example of how a representational picture of a man visiting a lady when she's working on her handloom. Also, the picture on the right side is this man, blowing buffalo horn. It's called hakai. So I'm inserting this bit because, again, hakai is very important in the romantic discourse of the Pomai. So blowing of buffalo horn, this has a deep a romantic implication. So a colloquial saying among the Pomai goes, when a buffalo is alive, it doesn't talk to people, but when it dies, it does communicate to people. So this refers to the whole idea of how the emotional appeal, the musical tune of blowing buffalo evokes emotional appeal in the listener. So the hakai, the buffalo, is the blowing of it is often invoke in many romantic tales where the lover, where the lady is walking the field and the guy is blowing this music and musical tune, and she could not resist the temptation of raising up her hand and looking around, knowing that it is her lover who is sending secret message and all that. Right. So so in the context of romantic discourse, blowing of hakai has a deep emotional, is associated with emotional ecstasy, with nostalgia, with romance, and the whole idea of wooing and courtship. Right. So in conclusion, I would just like to underline a few points that I have personally observed pertaining to the narrative of love and romance in Pomai society. Romantic love and pursuit of it is crucial in the social and individual life of Pomai. The cultural narrative of Pomai acknowledged the need and the quest for emotional connection, to seek out and find love within the convention of heteronormativity. Well, romantic love between man and women is validated and valorized. There's a certain notion on the idea of forbidden and or impermissible love and relationship. So for example, romantic relationship between paternal cousins, romantic intimacy between partners belonging to the same clan or factory is forbidden as incestuous. So within the cultural context of Pomai Naga, societal attitude to romantic love and the norms of how love is expressed and pursued is dynamic. It changes over time across generation. So love is expressed in different language within the ambit of possibilities and means available in their own cultural time and supporting a structure. So Pomai is a deeply communitarian society. It is within this close-knitted structure and social framework that the pertinency of Kelolesha or romantic love is foregrounded. But the complexity is the primacy of individual choice or personal choice gives way to the societal permit or sanction. In the contemporary conventional expectation, women are expected to be coy, expected to be the coy, passive beloved who must be wooed. But I observed that women play an active mutual role in the whole game of courtship. So, for example, they would spoil to the lovers with the best of food and drinks. They would give them with a lot of things. So, in the matter of love and courtship, the power dynamic between men and women was rather reciprocal and mutual. There has been a dynamic shift in the attitude and perception towards romance and romantic relationship, especially in terms of sexual behavior, owing to the change in moral and religious perception. In the pre-Christian context of Homo society, sexual behavior was not regulated by religious stricture, but rather by individual, moral, and social norms. Nevertheless, the clandestine, extramarital, and premarital relationship were not absent. However, the case of sexual violence, harassment, and rape cases were not heard of. Yeah, so this is all that I have to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Esther, for presenting such a nice paper and very interesting one. I mean, never heard of it. And I mean, I personally was so much intrigued with this paper. I loved it. Thank you so much for presenting it. The floor is open for a question. If you have any question, you can drop in the chat box. There's one question. You mentioned the use of guitar in the traditional wooing to songs. Do you think that would be contradictory to the narrative that the Nagas live in comparatively secluded life until 19th century?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question, Pavane. Yeah, so yeah, so when I mentioned the use of guitar, I'm also this is again based on my own personal experience, right? So growing up as a young girl, I've seen this, and of course, the guitar, this is a very contemporary thing, but again, this is a very contemporary thing, but again, it is something that has been okay, I don't know how to quite put it. Okay, so I don't quite know how to really answer this question, but yeah, I'll address to you this personally, Pavane.
In the chat box itself after the presentation, there's one more question by Dr. Sharma. He appreciates your presentation, very nicely presented. I want to know what is the overall position of Naga tribal women as of now? Or what is their location and represent action in the present literature? Overall position of Naga tribal women.
I would say that as far as the women position is concerned, comparatively, we are in a very good position. So discrimination against women, this is not it's not overtly done, as in especially as I've mentioned, sexual violence or physical violence against women is not done. But however, I've noticed this benign sense of subjugation, And so the society is, sort of subjugating you in a very benign way, but comparatively, women condition is still good, and women do have a very special role to play in the social, in the cultural setting of the society.
All right, Esther, there is one more question by Yamini. It is very interesting presentation. Thank you. Can you elaborate more on how religion or church and exposure to the outside world influences practice in any way?
Yeah, so okay, these practices, and so I'm going to answer this pertaining to these practices that I have mentioned. So okay, so exposure to the outside world, for example, the whole idea of dormitory system, it is no longer done. One, because of the whole idea of say urbanization or education. People don't really stay in village anymore. So that's one reason how in the contemporary time people don't really stay together. And also after Christianization, the system of dormitories, sleeping together as a group, this is sort of discouraged. This is discouraged. So people now after Christianization, they stay at their own, they sleep in their own homes.
There is one comment by Kevin. She said that there is an oversight in attributing it to the traditional practice, so I'm sure that they do have traditional instruments to supplement in the song. Thank you for the fascinating and detailed inquiry in the subject. I think she somehow made you answer this question. I mean, maybe not the guitar, maybe some other instruments must be present in the Naga tribe to familiarize with that kind of songs. Is that something that you know about?
Yeah, so Pavan, just to answer to that, yes, we do have certain instruments. So for example, we have so this is a women instrument, but that is played by putting in a mouth. I don't quite know how to explain it, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. But again, personally, I don't really see this in connection. I don't really see a romantic implication in this instrument. So this is more of a cultural base instrument, but not necessarily pertaining to the romantic discourse. So at the moment, all I can think of is haka that I've mentioned, and another instrument we call be. So we call bear. So it's a long, hollowed, a bamboo type of a plant, and it is dried and kept in the sun, and then it produces a beautiful sound. Beautiful sound. So again, yeah, that also has a romantic connotation.
All right, Esther. I don't think so there is any other question for you. So thank you so much for presenting such a nice presentation and enriching us to this whole idea of love and courtship in Naga tribe, how it's being followed and it is being taken up. Okay, she's also not familiar with the guitar thing. She also said that, but even though she's thanking you for that thing, that you explained it very well. Okay, we'll move to the next paper presenter. Thank you, Esther. The last paper presenter, Yamini Sharma. Yamini, the floor is open for you. You can introduce yourself and then proceed to your paper.
Yeah, first of all, very good morning to all of you. My name is Yamini, and I am a research scholar from the Department of Sociology, School of Liberal Studies, Ambedkar University. I got to know about this webinar by Dr. Manvi, and I'm so thankful because I was really looking forward towards something on the lines of tribal life, and the inside-outsider perspective is also very intriguing. I'd like to start my presentation by first sharing my screen. I have a PPT to go along with it. Yeah, so the title of my paper is Negotiating the Caste and Scheduled Tribe Identity, a case of Swanglas of Himachal Pradesh, India. So basically, Swanglas are amongst the 10 tribes on the list of scheduled tribes of the state of Himachal Pradesh. While the state classifies the entire Hindu population as the scheduled tribe of Swangla. It's only the dominant Brahmin caste of the region that is known as Swanglas by the people themselves. So I would like to just first start off with the layout that I want to present the presentation with is, if I'll start with the objective of the paper, that how the progression will be, then there's a section on understanding the anthropological category of tribe and the state and scheduled tribe, that how the state made the category of scheduled tribe. Both of these sections will have secondary literature as sources, while the remaining understanding of Swangla as a tribe with caste divisions, their caste relationships, and the category of Dalit Swanglas and their politics will be discussed later on in the consecutive sections, which are all done through ethnography, and my major methods were participant observation and interviews. There's an intertwining of the anthropological category of tribe and the state classification of scheduled tribes, mediated by caste in this case, which all the three together contribute to the lived reality of Songlas as a scheduled tribe. The paper traces how the colonial stereotype of the savage, wild, and uncivilized tribe has been historically analyzed in anthropological work, and arguably is reified by the state classification of scheduled tribe. While the state has not clearly defined the category of scheduled tribe, which was also bring forth very importantly by the canonical reading on the tribes, the concept of tribe by Bete. He problematizes this, and the Swanglas often subscribe to the very dominant ideas of savage, violent, and civilized themselves as they internalize the dominant ethic values that are brought by the state or the understanding that is commonsensical. The social relations of the dominant Brahmin Swanglas and the other castes and religious communities in the region are examined to indicate that the identity is a fissure one, not as homogeneous that we envision scheduled tribes to be, and we envision the Swanglas to be. Being classified as scheduled tribe ever lead to any stigma to the everydayness of scheduled tribes? And also, does the classification as a homogeneous community, the Dalit Swanglas and the Buddhist Swanglas, all these different identifications, do they get invisibilized, and what are its impacts, are the main focus of this paper. The emic and ethics, self-identification and exclusionary practices of the Brahmin and the other Swangla communities as they interact among themselves and the state and the others is the central focus of the paper. So I would like to start off by understanding how anthropology as a discipline led to the creation or the manufacturing of the category of tribe. Regarding this concept, Fabian, in his work The Time and the Other, has talked about the evolutionary understanding of societies by evoking the concept of time. He says that the Western civilization was considered to be the most advanced one in the evolutionary framework, while the non-West were the backward communities. But due to the Orientalist discourse giving a lot of value to the non-Western civilizations as well, like the Indus Valley Chinese civilization or the Egyptian civilization, even they become a little more above the hierarchy from the basic communities, which were the tribal or the hill communities, basically the ones which were called the people without history, as they did not have the written history with them. This gave ethical support to the idea of colonialism also, and the principle of white men's burden to civilize the non-Western societies. Sarukai has also, in his work called The Other in Anthropology and Philosophy, talked about inventing the human other to develop the theory of human kind. So Bhangya Bhukia also has engaged in the similar kind of debate in the Indian context, where he says that the British construction of textual knowledge about Indian communities was to manufacture the knowledge and to expand colonialism. So if we see that this anthropological category of tribe was manufactured and also taken as justification of colonialism, so we also should understand on how the state sees its subjects and how scheduled tribe came into the category of administration. So administrative category, scheduled tribe came, if we understand the roots, by understanding how the state first simplifies its local diversities for administrative conveniences. So James Scott, in his work Seeing Like a State, has uh, very well defined how the state apparatuses by like the census counting or the cadastral maps or the judges would usually simplify local communities, local diversities to for their administrative conveniences. And this in a sense also with the backing of the logic of civilizing the savage led to uh, the communities being called as scheduled tribes. The government of India acts consecutively during the colonial rule, and especially the government of Act 1935 led to the formation of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes. So there's also a debate on if the tribal communities of the country were isolated and always developing on its own, or they had interrelationships. They had taken the stand of how the tribal communities have been there.
I think there is some problem with loss from this meeting. I request everyone to wait for another 5 minutes. I'll call her. I will make sure she continues. She will be joining us in 5 minutes. Her laptop shuts down. So we'll wait for 5 minutes and she will be joining soon.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, I am in your
Just
audible. You
need
can
to
continue.
share my screen again.
Yes, please. You can share your screen again if that's possible. Yes, we can see that. We can see the screen, but I think you need to shift it, keep it.
Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah, I was talking about how there was this debate in anthropology and sociology for the longest about was the tribes isolated since the beginning, and or there was a connection between the mainstream and the tribal communities, or is are tribal communities the indigenous people. So in these kind of debates, Khaka says that even if we can say that there might be the interlinkages in history between the tribes and castes, it is because of the administrative interference of the British through these acts that I mentioned, that they were secluded later on, and that's why their isolation can be explained through this lens. The fact that we constantly have been seeing tribes in a way that the state gives them benefits, or as a community that needs saving, we actually deter or hinder them from being called seen as modern, ambitious and equal citizens of the people. uh, this was a quotation that I wanted to share. Further, then I'd like to start with my ethnographic work and about the community. So Swanglas as a caste community. Swanglas is a Hindu scheduled tribe situated in Lohal Valley of Himachal, and particularly the Patan Valley. The term Swangla in their local dialect, as I've already mentioned, is for the Brahmin section of the society only. While the remaining castes are, I'd like to mention the above the at the highest point, or the uppermost class is the caste is the Brahmins or the Swanglas. Then comes the Garu. Garu is if there's a wedlock between a Swangla father and a Buddhist mother, the son or the daughter will be called the Garu, and because of which a lot of families become the Garu. Maybe it was to deter intercaste marriages within the tribal community, that this was to degrade the Swangla grade to a Garu grade, that this institution was made. Then after that, there's the Sippis and Lohars. The Sippis are the drum beating communities, while the Lohars are the blacksmiths. Sippis are a little higher in number in the region than the Lohars. So the village where I was doing my fieldwork, Jalma village, there was around 130 households, out of which 10 were of Sippis and only 5 of Lohars. So Sippis are usually dominant if we talk about the SC population, and these both communities generally are considered Dalits because practice of casteism, untouchability is done on them. Their condition, traditional occupations were considered profane or profiling, causing impurity, and there's also a Buddhist subsection of the society. So Buddhist people are also part of the Bodh tribe in the region, but there are a few Buddhists in the Patan Valley who have intermarried or just stayed in the amongst the Swanglas, and they are considered at par with Garus. So Swangla Brahmins do have a supremacy in the entire hierarchy, while the Dalits, of course, the Sippis and the Lohars are subjected to a lot of discrimination. So there are incidences of casteism in the community that I already talked about. The usual practice of casteism can be seen like the Sippis and Lohars are not seated in the same place. You do not eat with them. Commensal relationships are not there. As the region where Swanglas live is very remote, and there is a very less water resources or sources of water. So that's why it's not possible that there will be different caste water sources. So the same source is shared by all the caste people, but it is ensured that if a Swangla enters and there are people already standing in the queue, the Sippis and Lohars have to give way. The Swanglas even have this practice of cleaning the tap and surrounding before even fetching water, because they feel that the water source is defiled by the presence of Sippi and Lohar. The ethic of this universal understanding of tribe is challenged then by these emic relationships of seclusion within their own tribe. The Swanglas are also seen as scheduled tribe, and therefore discriminated around the area when they go out of their own habitat, when they live in the neighboring Kullu. Historically, they actually came out of their own place because it was remote, and secondly because in search of food and money. So they started off with actually being the laborers, and therefore they were always considered as a lower caste person, or like they were not really accepted in the Kulu or the state's mainstream. But this was the discrimination of the entire Swanglas. But if we see the Sippis and Lohars, they are being doubly marginalized in that way, because they are marginalized as a scheduled tribe as well as a Dalit within their own scheduled tribe. So I would like to talk about now the Dalit Swanglas exclusively. So in the Lohar Spiti population, if we see by through census of 2011, there are 31,564 people in Lohal as Swangla community, while 1,224 people are only enumerated as SC population. So despite this small number, they are very well aware of their rights, and they are self-conscious. And it is because of the forms of discrimination that is shared within cities and lohas that they work as a pressure group and as a vote bank, collective vote bank wherever they have to. Um, so in my fieldwork, I also came across this activist, Dalit activist of the region named Lalchand Dhisa from Jalma village, and he is in his 60s now, and he organized Dalit Yuva Sangharsh Sangathan in his school times itself. So that shows that that spark of uh, asserting their own identity and not uh, being being the victims of prejudice and discrimination. The people, the Dalits of the region had been proactive. He recollects how his grandfather refused to play the traditional instrument, and he was boycotted and even attacked by the upper caste. His story is actually well known in the region, but he also says that his grandfather was actually amongst the well-off Dalits. That's why he could do that. A lot of other people still beat the drums for the Jina Marna. Jina Marna means that it's a colloquial term for all the rites that happen in one's life. So all the rituals that are major, like the death ritual or the birth ritual or marriages, these kind of important festivals also, the Dalit, the Sippis of the Swangla community were to beat drums, and then they would get money, or not money actually, they would be paid in kind. So this was a form of begging that the new people consider it to be the new motivated young educated Sippis gradually are trying to convince their families to quit the drum beating job altogether, especially because there's no remuneration and it's near to begging, and they also feel that they're not even allowed to enter the houses and they are made to sit outside the house where the shoes are kept of the other people, which is deeply humiliating. So, uh, while understanding their politics, I was also told, like when I was in the field, it was mostly the panchayat election was going on. So, in during those times, I saw how that the upper caste would come even to them for votes, but how they would always vote collectively. And also, when I sat with them and had conversations, they told me that how they already know that they're outside the social circus and circle, and that's why all these promises and persuasions are superficial. So whenever they get a chance, they would always vote for someone from their own community. So, being a scheduled caste, and if they are their state identification is a scheduled caste, they have major problems in the Panchayati Raj elections process. So, the Panchayati Raj extension to the Scheduled Area Act of 2006 is actually celebrated throughout academics and like in the country, but there's an alternative view here that the scheduled tribe person will only be elected as a scheduled in the scheduled areas as pradhan. So due to which the Dalits of the region will never get to be the pradhan of their village. Secondly, the Gram Sabha is given more power with this act, while the Grams, because of their low numbers, it is very unfortunate that they always have to agree to what the upper caste say. So because of these issues, they have fought for dual status. So the dual status demand was made by the Dalit Janjatiya Sangh, where they wanted uh, their community to have not just enumeration as SC but as ST. So the government actually, after a lot of persuasions, a lot of delegations over the late 90s to early 2000s, it led to the notification by the state government of granting this dual status, where they can have both the certificates with them of a scheduled caste and a scheduled tribe. But the problem here is that they can only use one of it, because of which what happens is that when somebody wants to be a pradhan of the area, that person would enumerate and claim the ST setter certificate. And then even when the census comes to the region, he is seen as an ST, because of which there is an undercounting of the Dalit community altogether, and would actually interfere with the way policies made for the Dalits of the region. Um, so they were not really satisfied with how this panned out, and now they actually demand for recognition of the term scheduled tribe Dalit as a subcategory within the community, and this they want in a constitutional form, so that it is pan India, and from this region they're starting this movement and hoping that it reaches to the mainstream. um, through all my presentation, I now come to my conclusions. So the Swanglas of Himachal Pradesh is a Hindu scheduled tribe with explicit caste features. This is unfathomable to the larger understanding of tribes. Thus, it leaves no space to the Dalit Swanglas or the scheduled tribe Dalit to even exist. This invisibility in law against caste oppression within the scheduled tribe counters the spirit of justice enshrined in the Indian Constitution. So I have missed a very small point that is also worth a mention. While I was talking about how PESA is against the justice that we actually the scheduled tribe Dalits needed. So also there's this provision called Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, which is a landmark judgment, and because of which a lot of exploited scheduled caste and scheduled tribe people put up their pro- uh, problems, especially of harassment and violence. But it does not operationalize in scheduled areas where um, there's also a case very comprehensively described by Himika Bhattacharya in her work on the Laholi women. She talks about how a woman from the Dalit community was unable to even report against the upper caste scheduled tribe of the region. And here again, this injustice happened, and providing them this status of scheduled tribe Dalits would probably, in the longer run, provide them justice and self-respect. Not just that, I think academically it will provide us for an understanding of scheduled tribes as dynamic and modern subjects, which are seeking assertion and seeking citizenship in their own ways. And we would also then move to understanding of tribals as more complex, more aspiring and evolving societies. That's it for the presentation, but I do have a few pictures to share and validate the points that I had. So these were other collective water sources. This is outside a temple, and this was outside the village I was staying. Of course, I could not click pictures, and there were a lot of people, and there was this practice of untouchability going on, but I still wanted to show that how the water sources are there. Then there's one of this picture. So here you can see people wearing this traditional attire, and they were the women from the Mahila Mandal who were supposed to perform for the snow festival that was organized in January 2021. There's this alternative stance of the a couple dual couple kind of arrangement in the dance. There was one woman was embodying the women's character by wearing the silver earpiece that you can see, while there was one with the black hat that would be the man. There was a group of 10 people, and everyone, even I was also participating in this one is my picture, if you can see. So the thing is that we were wearing the silver headgear, but I noticed that the Dalit women, the city women, was also playing the women character, but she did not get the silver headgear. So it was the Mahila Mandal who would have, collectively asked everyone to find the jewelry for them, the traditional jewelry, but because she is from the Dalit community, and like she is not considered the part of the circle, core circle, so she was not given that. The second picture that I have is of a wedding. I wanted to put it here to show that how they are a Hindu community and their rituals are also very much like Hindus. He's actually putting what the red, whatever it is called, I don't know, sindoor to the bride. And the next picture is of a man voting in the panchayat elections. That's what I wanted through this picture, was to convey that they do have modern aspirations. They do follow the state, and they do um, have their own ideas of voting and all. The last are my like these are the screenshots I've taken from social media. So Lahore Spiti was actually outside, very remote until the Atal Tunnel came, and because of which there was only BSNL 2G network working there. But in 2020, when I started my fieldwork, I have seen suddenly the boom of technology. And in 2021, when there was panchayat elections, you see how people are conversing online also. The virtual campaigns are also going on. And lastly, I would like to just end my presentation by pointing out to this picture on the right, where this woman is, this is a poster of the appeal for her candidature as Zilla Parishad. So she has actually used the salutation for people as Buddhijeevi Janta, aap sabko mera sadar namaskar. So that shows that how the tribals themselves now consider themselves as intellectuals and should be given that space of modernity, and we should see them above than they're just exotic rituals that we usually tend to see. So the community that I study is also usually studied for its older practices of polyandry and their traditional dress or like their jewelry. But I think we should be more inclusive of understanding their everydayness as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yamini. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. The floor is open for the discussion. You can drop down your question in the chat box. There is one question by Dr. Sharma. Are these narratives having eco-existence, equality, and equanimity?
What does eco-existence mean? Is it a typo or it means eco-existence? So I would also like to bring this forward, that in my research I have noticed that most of the literature that we study on tribes, and usually the remote isolated tribes, we always talk about relationship and coexistence with nature. And yes, presently in Lahore, there are a lot of projects that are water hydel projects that are about to start, and people have started to evoke the larger narrative of eco conservation, and that how tribes should actually, like the community is against building of hydel projects. But other than that, there is no relationship, I think, with nature in their own society. They are very much mechanized. They are into commercial farming, and of course, they their own rituals and religion and practices are very much like the Brahmins or the upper caste or mainstream Hinduism, um, with a little diversion, I would say, of the hill deities that they follow. But this is also a way of essentializing tribes, I think, when we just talk about them in relation to nature. Um, and I want to, through this presentation, bring out their multifacetedness of their being touched with modernity and their political selves as well. Yeah, that's my response.
All right, thank you, Yamini. We'll wait for another 1 minute for any other question if they want to ask. There's one more question. Do you think climate change bringing change in the lives also of the tribes?
Yes, definitely climate change brings change to everyone, I think, not just them. And yes, during my field, actually, when I was staying in the village, once early in the morning, I was just doing, like, I want to share this incident. So, I was just practicing my yoga, and I just heard stones falling around on the other side of the hill. And usually people don't really bother, but maybe because I was an outsider and very excited to take pictures and just note everything down, so I just went there and started taking a video. And then suddenly we noticed that the entire large chunk of the rock or the hill came down, and Chandrabhaga river was actually blocked for a few hours. So of course this led to a lot of problems. A few of the houses got spoiled, I would say, because a lot of, and there was a cattle was flew out of the houses, and there was a lot of problem that happened. And after that, the village community got together and helped these people. That way, and also they saw that there was flash floods this year. But the thing is that the people here do not see it as climate change. They actually saw it with relation to the snow festival that happened. So in January, there was this snow festival, the picture that also showed of women dressed up. So people with this with their own ideas of spirituality and religiosity think that the gods were unhappy because in the months of winter, when you're supposed to be leaving this place, leaving the land barren and silent for religious purposes, you are actually pleasing the tourism, pleasing the people, the state, and the tourists by performing these things. So this was their actually the parallel understanding of the incidences that actually happened due to climate change. Another thing is that they have been into commercial farming. They have been into aggressively modernizing themselves, and always welcome projects like building of roads, the Atal Tunnel, because it gave them connectivity. So I don't think so that they really have up till now thought much on the climate change aspect or the conservation of tourism, like in that sense. At the same time, a lot of NGOs are working also on this region, and they're also uh, creating a lot of awareness on forest acts and on how conservation can happen through the community itself. So I would also like to take the question on scheduled caste Dalits. Yeah, scheduled tribe Dalits actually.
Yes, it's a big.
So the thing is that usually there's a homogeneous understanding of tribes, not just administratively or by the state. I would say even in most of our anthropological works that I have read till now, I have seen that we do understand the caste tribe continuum or such kind of frames, but we see the incidences of how the tribe is a homogeneous section that tries to emulate the upper caste and maybe become a part of the Hindu fold, or due to some other reasons, the entire tribe became a part of the hierarchy of the mainstream. But here you see a tribe which actually has its own hierarchy, caste positions. And not just that, I think it's also not very simple to say that they are emulating Brahmins, or uh, if they are Hindus themselves, or if they have another social stratification. They are just correlating with the mainstream. But whatever that is, the fact that there are existence of untouchability discrimination to a few sections of the society which claim themselves to be Dalits because of the cause of and their identity that is shared with the scheduled caste of the country is very important to understand, I think. And especially because of their marginalization, I have given incidences on how they could not avail facilities like Prevention of Atrocity Act, and could not file a report. The women could not file the report. Or in PESA, because of PESA, you cannot ever become the pradhan of your region if you are just a scheduled tribe. So that's why they want to claim scheduled tribe as well as scheduled caste, both the benefits they needed, and so they asked for dual status, but dual status is also not helping them. So they want a constitutional identification of the term scheduled caste Dalit. That means they will not be made to actually choose between scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, because they are both. And like in enumeration also, this would become a subsection would be of like more value to them, and it would resolve a lot of issues that they face. And that's why I'm advocating for this in my paper, I guess. And lastly, the temporary glacial bursts and damming with rocks have done havoc with people downhill. I might think we're facing some problems as well by the Naga Tribe. Yeah, so the glacial burst and damming of the rock, the incident that I told you, I would also like to elaborate a little more on this because I'm asked. So usually what happens is that in the geography of Law Spiti, I have noticed that the villages are usually at a very higher elevation than the river. Usually, there are very few. The main village is always on a higher elevation. So, in this cloud burst, we and in damming of rocks, we see mostly the temporary housings where you keep your supplies for the winter, the hay or the grass for the cattle, that was attacked. The land was ruined where they were harvesting, but there were also 2 or 3 households that were attacked because they lived outside the village. And who are these people? The ones who live outside the village are, of course, the scheduled caste Dalits. So because they are considered outside the village. And there was also this problem of how, because they were outside the village and they're considered Dalits, and there was the Dalits complained of that they were not given adequate attention. Like even the government came and just did lip service to them. They were given 5,000 rupees, and they told me that in 5,000 rupees, how can you even imagine us to have the supply of grass, which one account of it, if we say, is about 1,000 rupees, and they collected all over the years. How will that suffice? And in the winter season, how will they live? Because in regions like Lahore Spiti, it is so remote, it is so cold that in the entire winter, you don't have a single leaf. So how does the cattle live? You have to collect the supplies for throughout the year. That's why they have a rigorous summer also. And because of this incidents, that was taken away, and the state also gave them only 5,000. The Mahila Mandal did not help them enough. They thought that even Mahila Mandal came, and one of the informant told me that they said, "Koi problem hogi to batana." That was what the Mahila Mandal had told. Yeah, they had told that, "Do you think we should bring food for you?" So like the third that caste, the scheduled tribe Dalits felt was that, are we supposed to say that yes, bring us food? Like, was it not obligated that when we don't even have a house, when we don't have kitchens, when we don't have anything, our house is entirely washed away? Like the apathy that was there within the community. And when I talked to the upper caste people, they said that, even we are busy with our seasons. We went there and we asked, what more do they want? So this kind of dynamic is there. There is no homogeneity, there is no equality or unanimity. It's only in the name that they carry, that all of them are the scheduled tribe Swanglas, but they do have their own challenges. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Yamini, for elaborating so much on that. I mean, I think you have answered all the questions with a very nice, detailed elaboration. Thank you so much for your presentation also. It was a really nice presentation. And I request Professor Patnaik, sir, to just let me know if I can present, if it's possible to extend the session for
Yes,
minutes?
please
Okay.
proceed. Please proceed.
All right, sir. So I am the only person who's left to present. So do let me know if my voice is not clear in between, and you can interrupt me if I am exceeding the time.
It is clear, very much clear. Proceed.
Okay. So please interrupt me if I am exceeding the time limit.
Okay, sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. So before starting the presentation, I would like to give a brief introduction about myself. Most of you know me because I've been moderating these sessions also. So I'm Dr. Manvi. I'm presently teaching in Dalton Evening College, University of Delhi, and I have done my PhD from Department of MIL&LS, University of Delhi. So my paper is titled as The Insider Perspective on Tribal Culture through Narayan Kocheredi, the Arya women. You can see that the title is the same title is there in the schedule that is being circulated. I'll start with one of the facts that we all know that India has the second largest tribal population in the world, and it constitutes around 8.6% of Indian population according to the Census of India 2001. So the development of the tribal in India has been one of the major concerns of every government since its independence. The tribes have a rich oral literature in the form of songs, folklores, tales, riddles, etc. Though these are older than the written literature of the mainstream tradition, they have been given low status in the written word. Several writers and compilers have gathered these oral forms and translated them into Indian languages as well as English. Apart from the theme of protest, other aspects of life of tribals too are reflected in these narratives. Their unwritten literature has songs about love, ritual, joy, sorrow, and we have seen that thing in various presentations also. They are sung accompanied by musical instruments and a clear indication of their celebratory instincts. They are shown, or they show, and that tribal life is also vibrant and joyful. The tribal writers try to demolish the perception of the non-tribal writers that Adivasi culture is backward, uninvolved, or superstitious. So my major agenda of this paper is to put up Narayan's perception in this presentation, that how he feels that non-tribal writers are portraying and how he thinks that his community, Mala Arya tribe particularly, that he is drawing greatly from, is similar to any other kind of people living in our country. They are not some kind of uninvolved people, or maybe some kind of secluded people. So they are also similar to any other human being. They have their own culture and their own rituals that are performed in their community. So one aspect of my paper will deal with that, and another aspect, which is also the second stage in which Narayan is stating the resistance, that how modernization, how this urbanization has affected the tribal life, and particularly to his tribe, and how they are changing with the change in economic and socio-cultural changes that are happening in our country. So what is his take on this and how he interprets it? I wanted to narrate that thing through his novel, Kocheredi's The Arya Women. So several writers and compilers have gathered these oral texts and translated them into Indian languages and English also. The tribal writers try to demolish the perception that the non-tribal writers that the Adivasi culture is backward, uninvolved, and superstitious. Tribal literature is also alive to reality and calls for social change, since it's a place where the hidden structures of the struggle of the community went through. It deals with the struggle for survival, daily problems, and hope and aspiration of the tribal people. The tribal writers aimed to set a representation of their people's rights and to establish self-representation, or to bring a sense of being an Adivasi into the world of imaginative writing. The novelist Narayan also had the same aim when he wrote the novel in the Malayalam language first. So Narayan's Kocheredi is the first Malayalam tribal novel published in 1998, and later in 2011 it was translated into English by Catherine Sankamma. The novel won Kerala Sahitya Academy Award in 1999 and the Economist Crossword Book Award in 2011 when it was translated by Catherine. The novel is based on Mala Arya tribe in Kerala, their history and struggles in life, and their myths, rituals, social customs, and belief systems. The writer draws heavily from their oral tradition and evokes the nature and spirit of tribe imagined as present in the imagination of the tribe. Further, it deals with their life and experience in the changing socio-economic and cultural context. Narayan makes a conscious attempt to show this community as distinct community with a distinct form of social cultural practices. For Narayan, writing poetry is an act of resistance against the misrepresentation of his community. And in one of the interviews which he had given to Catherine, the translator of this novel, he says, and I quote here, the Adivasi, when represented, appeared as Rakshas or Nishacharan of mythological stories. It is always a negative picture. They are depicted as pathetic, unable to react to injustice, or even worse, inhuman and subhuman kind of a representation is there. They existed for the sole purpose of being defeated or killed by the forces of virtue and goodness, represented by upper caste and upper class. There are few of us who wanted to resist this kind of biased representation. We wanted to tell the world that we have our own distinct way of life, our own value system. We are not demons lacking in humanity, but a strong, hardworking, self-reliant community. That are his words, and this whole interview is being appended in the novel also at the end. So in the novel, Narayan tries to render his experiences of his community to restore the past and identity of tribal community, which is now in the phase of transition due to the process of assimilation with the mainstream culture and the advancement of modernity. He also discusses tribals' negotiation with the forces of modernity. The novel records the story of the three generations of same family of Malaria tribe that is wonderfully blending the past, present, and future tribal culture. So if they are the Aryan, is the representative of the first generation of the family. He has two children, a son, Kuncha Zichan, and a daughter, Kunju Penny, who is married. The daughter is married to a person named Kuncha Raman, and which these two son and daughter represent, and their son-in-law represent the second generation. And you have a third generation where you have a daughter of Kuncha Raman and Kunju Penny, Parvati, who is well educated and influenced by the urban lifestyle, urban life as such, and represent the third generation of the family. So in the first half of the novel, Narayan projects a vivid picture of Mala Aryan lifestyle and tries to record their particular beliefs, rituals, ceremonies, and customs related to their marriage institution, birth ceremonies, and funeral systems. The Mala Arya community lives in close communion with nature. And these, if you will read the novel, you will get to know that these rituals that he is describing are very much similar to what any other person or any other person who practices Hinduism is similar to that. They're not something distinct that we are surprised of. So the very idea that they are some different creature altogether, these tribes are different creature altogether, are being demolished by these narratives of Narayan. So Narayan articulates that the Mala Arya tribe marriage is a sacred bonding system. They have this marriage institution based on endogamy. Marriages are not allowed in other clans. Mala Arya society has some specific plan in which marriages are regulated. So if a person commits some terrible crime, he becomes an outcast also. So in the novel, Narayan portrays the marriage ceremony as an inviolable tradition of tribal people. There is no place for child marriage and dowry system in this community. After marriage, girls become the owner of everything that is there in bridegroom's family, including utensils, house, and land. Narayan describes the ritual and ceremony very closely to clear the misunderstanding of the people of modern society about tribal culture. The mainstream always tries to dominate the tribal culture by presenting a stereotypical image. Narayan has raised his voice against this stereotype representation through this novel. Apart from these rituals and ceremonies from birth to death, the writer also focuses on the religious practices and beliefs. Malaria tribes have their therapy system centered on nature and religion. Kochuraman, who is also the tribal physician, cures the diseases by Ayurvedic medicines based on natural plants, including various herbs and other natural products like the fat of animals to cure their wounds. They show that the life of people, tribal people particularly, is dependent on the forest and natural products. Despite living in dense forests and hills, tribal people lead healthy and fruitful lives. They have abundant knowledge of medicines and remedies. So the novel also demonstrated changes that occur in the methods of treatment system as such due to the advancement of medicine and coming up of various industries in the region. There was a time when Ityadi, as the representative of the first generation, used magical therapy to cure diseases. When Kunjupenu developed a dangerous rash after being poisoned, Ityadi tried to heal her with Ashan incantation, but he failed to cure her. His failure marks a moment when traditional practices call for the change, and Konchuraman's entry into the scene enunciates this change. So Konchuraman from the second generation believes in Ayurvedic medication. He uses various herbs and other natural products which are easily available in the forest. So Narayan also points out the issue of tribal women regarding their health problems during pregnancy and puberty. Tribal people are still far away from the facilities of government policies and journal policy that should be implemented in their region, which are not implemented, unfortunately. The facilities for primary health care are not, available in their village. Consequently, Mala Alayar women face a problem during the delivery. Sometimes they come to death. It is their traditional method only of health care that saves their life during the childbirth. So there's a midwife in every village to assist the childbirth. Some herbs are usually applied. A paste kind of a thing is being made, and it is applied with the oil and smeared thickly all over the body of the pregnant women to make the delivery as easy as possible. The second half of the novel reveals the identity crisis and exploitation of the Malla Arya tribe, which occurs due to the modernization, displacement, and assimilation of non-tribal culture. Identity of Mala Arya community is associated with their closeness to nature or land. For instance, their addresses are more inclined towards there's a tree, there's a stone, you take left or right from that tree, that stone. So it is like that. So they are more inclined towards or close to the nature. But the process of modernization and development has influenced the lives of Malaria tribe, and the tribe is thrown into the new world and fails to understand the meaning of independence, democracy, and progress, and gets exploited by outsider or by the traders. The land and the forests that were earlier secluded from the external influences are now open to the outsiders. Roads cutting across their territory have opened the way for traders of all kinds. Large contractors for timber have gradually teased the tribal away from agriculture as a means of production. Employment and wages are gaining slow acceptance. It is not accepted as such in the tribal population. The introduction of cash economy has changed traditional perception of wealth, and greed for money enters the Adivasi consciousness. Deforestation is also an important aspect that he's focusing on. So deforestation is going on in the name of development, which is seen in the cities and urban areas also. The consequences are that tribes are pushed on the verge of the starvation. Their means of livelihood have been snatched. Their exclusive treatment based on nature is also destroyed. So Narayan is acutely conscious of this clash between forces of tradition and the compulsions of modernity. Education has been an agent of change in the lives of tribes. We all know that it has helped them to preserve the tradition and culture of the tribe and produce intellectual personalities to document the history and culture. It brings hope of a new dawn, new values and practice that are adopted, and new languages are learned. So the novelist believes that modernization has uplifted the lives of Malaria tribe, providing education and awareness among them. But at the same time, it acts as an agent to demolish the original identity of the community. He mentions that the later generation does not carry the name of their tribe and is more inclined towards upper caste Hindu gods and goddesses name as such as Parvati, Kalyani, Lakshmi, Devki, Madhavan, Narayan, etc. So the tribal writers like Narayan provide an insider viewpoint to highlight interior conflict which arise due to the clash of modernity and tradition. He has raised their basic problem regarding health, education, and development, along with the issue of deforestation, migration, displacement, and exploitation by outsiders. Narayan's novel brings to the fore the question of tribal identity, criticizes the dominant ideology, and tries to restore the tribe's history through the oral, symbolic, and non-linear nuances of the past. Lastly, the Narayan dwells deep into his tribal rituals, myths, beliefs, customs, tradition, and practices, and all become the expression through which culture and cultural resistance are practiced. The social and cultural significance of these rituals in the tribal culture is of significance that these rituals maintain the ecological and social balance intact for centuries. Affirmation of the self through articulation is the only way that the novelist is also portraying, is the only way for the tribes to feel whole, feel alive, and retain a sense of pride and dignity. Thank you so much. The floor is open for the questions. If you have a question for me particularly, you can drop in the chat box.
Very good. I think the response not
Dr. Manvi, you can do one thing. You can ask them to, unmute and step
Okay.
back. Typing will take time.
Yeah.
Dr. Venkat, please.
Okay, I think Professor Patnaik has a wonderful idea altogether this, that you can even unmute yourself and ask the question.
We are making everybody co-host so they can.
Okay, right.
Because, they can raise their hands. Now, anybody who is interested to ask question to Dr. Manvi can do that, and they have to unmute their system and to ask question. Yes, Atata madam, you unmute and ask.
Thank you, sir. May I ask directly to Dr. Manvi?
Yes. She is the moderator come.
Presenter.
Thank you, Dr. Manvi, for your paper.
Thank you, ma'am.
Would you please clear the position of insider? You, as a paper presenter, your paper is on insider's perspective on authority. So would you please clear the position of you as a paper presenter? Do you consider yourself?
No, I am not the insider. Insider perspective of tribal culture through Narayan's Kochereti. So Narayan's Kochereti is the only source I have to dwell into the tribal culture and particularly to Mala Arya tribe. So my perspective is secondary, and I am taking Narayan's novel as my primary source for the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
So I am doing it through Narayan. So I am making sure that his perspective is more prominent in my writing, and I somehow include other writers' perspective also. How his analysis of tribal culture is very much distinct, and what's his take on tribal culture or tribe as such, and how he is moderating between the modernism and traditional values that are changing with the constant change in the time. So I am analyzing that.
Okay, I assume that you cannot read the original text and you must have taken help from the English translation, right?
Yes. The translation has been published in 2011, so I took that.
Yes, this Catherine Thakama.
Yes.
Catherine Thakama is not an Arya lady. So
no,
do you think some portion of some contents are lost in the translation because she is not an insider like the original writer Narayana?
Yes, I believe so, because kind of affirmation I see in the interviews of Narayan, which is appended in the novel itself, which gives me a motivation. Yes, that he is more, developing a narrative which is so strong and affirmative, which I think when it comes to the translated text somehow gets passive. So for that reason, I consulted interviews also, and I read, other takes of his other perspectives about what he thinks about others' writing and how he criticizes that. So that is something different when it comes to translated text. So I also believe that, but nevertheless, she tried to include the idioms, phrases that are there in the community because that cannot be translated as well. The name specifically to particular rituals that cannot be completely translated into English. So she has retained those names in the translated text as well.
Yes, and I have noticed one more thing, that Takama has included lots of footnotes related to the cultural items and everything. Anyway, thank you very much for your answer. That much from my side.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, if I'm allowed.
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, Dr. Sharma, please.
I always have taken the lead in asking the question, so I could not have put myself behind. Just a kind of intuition comes to my mind that do you think, first of all, I must congratulate you for your presentation, and also thankful to Professor Patnaik to give us this platform, though in a virtual mode, but we learned a lot throughout all these presentations. So what I feel like that there is need of revisiting the tribe and the text when it comes to the translated text, because when it was written or when it has been translated, since that very time, lot of many interventions come as insider and outsider also, that there is a lot of difference in between what has been translated and what is really the real context. So what's your take on this? Because I think there is a lot of area and scope for working all together, bringing all these tribal scholars and writers as well as the insiders, so that a real perspective comes out. And I think there can be virtual platforms, as also there can be some research networks established all over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pankaj Sharma, for this great questions. I also believe, I agree with you that the new perspective needs to come out, and contemporary perspective needs to be looked at. But the novel is a literary representation of the culture, rituals, and belief system of a particular tribe. So that's why I wanted to explore more on. Yes, I agree with you, and I think anthropology departments or ethnographic departments are wonderfully, charting out all the tribal culture. And for that reason, we are able to get to know more about, contemporary rituals and belief systems of these tribes and how it is being followed, how it is being modernized. The literary representation is one of the another form of, knowledge system that through which we will get to know that this happened and this was happening earlier, and how the changes occurred in their tribe and how they cope in the sense how they revolted against the change, or how they have compromised with the change, or are they even following their traditions or not. For instance, the last generation which I refer to, the third generation, Parvati, they're not carrying the tribal names as such. They are not having this ideology that you have to marry in your clan only, or to the tribal person only. They are not carrying this kind of perception in their head. So that has changed, and now I'm also reflecting this change, that how these generations are changing because of the education, because of the modernization. And he is giving us this perspective that is the change necessary? Is the change good? Or is the change, moving away us from our own tradition and culture? Who will preserve our culture if we are not going to preserve it ourselves? So that is what he is raising a bigger questions, and that needs a whole room for the discussion. Do we need to preserve our own culture, or do we need to change with the modernization? So that is what I understood from the novel. Is there any other question that someone wants to ask? You can just unmute yourself, because I think you have been made co-host. You can simply unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, then I think we'll close, and thank you, Manvi, for taking the
Thank you.
responsibility as the student of the department, and you had dual responsibility today. And in
Thank
fact, this is the third such occasion the audience are meeting you directly,
Yeah.
interacting with you directly, of course,
Yes.
in
Yes.
virtual mode. And thank you very much. We will close here because we have to assemble again at 2 o'clock.
Yes. Yes. Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, each and every presenters and listeners, for joining us for this session. And I hope you will join us in the last session also. And thank you, Professor Patnaik, sir, for giving me this opportunity and even accommodating my paper and exceeding the time limit as such. So thank you so much for cooperating with us. Thank you and have a nice evening. And